Welcome to Great Loop Lifestyles. Today we are in Chicago. I'm Kim Russo with America's Great Loop Cruisers Association, and we regularly poll our members to get the best of the loop in a whole bunch of different categories. One of them is the best big city on the loop, and Chicago has won that designation many times. We pulled up and tied up at DuSable Harbor, which is really in the heart of everything. So it is the preferred marina for most loopers in Chicago. That's a view at night with a beautiful full moon and still water, and that's a view directly from our slip. So not only are you in the heart of everything, but you have that spectacular skyline view of Chicago. The Riverwalk is definitely an attraction not to miss, and it starts right there adjacent to the marina. It's really just this walking path that follows the river on both sides. It's got lots of buildings, lots of foliage, lots of landscaping. It also gives you a great view of all of the skyscrapers, but there's also lots of restaurants and boat rentals, all kinds of activity happening along the Riverwalk. For those of you who are Seinfeld fans, the Summer of George was one of the boats that we saw regularly cruising up and down the Riverwalk there. It's also a stunning view at night. And although Chicago gets a lot of bad press for crime, we felt extremely safe all over this area. Even at night on the Riverwalk, there's lots of activity happening, and it just feels like a safe place to be. One of the favorite activities or attractions in Chicago is the architectural boat tour. Now, the Perch is not able to go down the Chicago River because our height is too tall for some of those bridges that you see here in the pictures. Whether or not your boat can make those bridges, and they're charted somewhere between 17 and 18 feet for the most part, but whether or not you can clear those bridges and take the Chicago River as part of your Great Loop, we recommend taking the architectural boat tour. You learn a whole lot about the history of the city and about the history of the different buildings. There are different branches on the Chicago River that all kind of have a different look and feel to them. This area is a little bit more industrial than some of the others. Parts of it were once a huge Montgomery Ward facility. This building is known as the Corn Cob Building. You can kind of see why. And the bottom part there is a parking garage. The top is living space, and there's even a marina at that building. This was one of our favorites. The building almost appears to have waves in it, and that is accomplished by moving each floor either 5 inches out or in from the previous floor, and it creates this illusion of the building kind of having waves. But one of the interesting things about this area is that Chicago has designated that any new construction or renovations have to include some public Riverwalk space. So that has created some pretty interesting shapes on some of the buildings. So you can see there's kind of bottom floor openness on some of them. And this one that's kind of shaped like a martini glass is shaped as such so that they can meet the need for that public Riverwalk space. Moving on to some little kind of quirky things. One of my favorites is the Tribune Tower, the Chicago Tribune Tower. It's got rocks in the surface of the tower that are from all around the world. There's even a moon rock in there, but 50 states, many different countries. I enjoyed just kind of browsing around the building and seeing where all the different rocks were from. Right around the corner from the Tribune Tower is the Museum of Ice Cream, which many people recommended to me, probably because of my openness about looking for the best ice cream on the Great Loop. We actually stopped there when we were at the Tribune Tower, and they were sold out of tickets for the day. We didn't make it back, but you can check that out. Lots of pink going on there, but it seems like it's geared towards both children and adults, and it does have unlimited ice cream while you're there, so hard to beat that. This is an art installation happening right now called Art on the Mart. It is projected onto the Merchandise Mart building there along the Riverwalk, and you can just sit or stand and watch the little projection. There's a couple of different sequences that it goes through, so that was just kind of something different to see in Chicago. A highlight attraction for many is Millennium Park, and of course you've got the famous bean here. The official name of the bean is Cloud Gate. Of course, it is shaped like a bean, which is why it's known as such, but you can see the reflection of the buildings, the clouds, everything else in the city as you move around this bean-shaped sculpture. The reflection is just really beautiful, and pictures really don't do it justice. So if you're in Chicago, definitely check out the bean. One of my favorites was the Art Institute of Chicago. I've been to a lot of museums along the way. I don't know a whole lot about art, but I really found this to be a wonderful stop and a wonderful museum. Lots of very famous paintings here. They had several Monets, several Van Goghs, Rembrandt, more. It's really particularly if you're an art lover, but even if you're not, this was a really wonderful place to tour. I enjoyed the afternoon I spent there. They do have a public tour daily at a specific time. I arrived for that and it had been canceled, and I had just as much fun just kind of walking around by myself, browsing all of the spectacular pieces of art. So definitely check out the Art Institute. Navy Pier is also a big attraction that is right by the DuSable Harbor. Navy Pier has a Ferris wheel, of course, and that's kind of what stands out, but you actually will first pass Navy Pier as you're approaching Chicago Harbor. This was originally called the People's Pier, and after World War I, it was renamed in honor of the U.S. Navy, so it is now Navy Pier. And they have, as I said, a Ferris wheel. Kind of, it's an event space, but there are lots of activities going on there, some restaurants, some shops. It is definitely an attraction there in Chicago. This is kind of a shoreside look at Navy Pier, but as we kind of sweep to the right there, you can see the Chicago Lock. If you start the Great Loop in the Great Lakes, well, in Lake Michigan, I guess I should say, or Lake Huron, this may be the very first lock you're going through. It's a pretty small lock, but significant as it is what is letting you into the Chicago River. Moving on to groceries. Mariano's is a fabulous grocery store. 2 levels, so if you're not used to that, it took us a minute to kind of find all of the produce and things like that. We thought we had found it, and turned out it was on the next floor along with the meats. But all the choices you could imagine. A Gold Looper who's been around a couple times actually told me they thought it was one of the top grocery stores on the Great Loop, and it is just a short walk from DuSable. We, of course, couldn't resist Ghirardelli's for the chocolates and the hot fudge sundaes. But in general, you're going to find lots of shopping on the Magnificent Mile, which is Michigan Avenue. Michigan Avenue runs over the Chicago River, and just about any type of shopping you can imagine you'll find on the Magnificent Mile. So if you're kind of missing some of the clothes stores or boutiques or shops that you are used to while you're on the Great Loop, Magnificent Mile is the place for you. Trying to pick out some favorite restaurants in Chicago is just about impossible, so I'm just going to mention a few that we enjoyed, but there are so many restaurants in Chicago that really do some research, find your favorite kind of food, check reviews. But we visited Osteria Via Stato with some other Looper boats, and this was a kind of a neighborhood Italian restaurant, and the food was delicious. And then we headed over to Pops for Champagne, which had some champagne cocktails that we also really enjoyed. So if you're in that part of town, those are 2 restaurants. As I said, I'm hesitating to recommend any restaurants because there are just so many choices, but one I do not hesitate to recommend is Wildberry. This is our favorite breakfast restaurant anywhere, and there are a few locations in Chicago. One is a very short walk from DuSable. They are open for breakfast and lunch. All of the food is really amazing, but what stands out is their pancakes because they have all different types of toppings. Some of them make it almost a little bit more like a dessert, but they're not overdone on the sweetness. We tend to like the Wildberry pancakes, which is a combination of berries and almost like a yogurt that they put on there. And we also really enjoy the blueberry Danish pancakes. We have learned that Michael and I can actually order a 2-egg breakfast with potatoes and bacon and a side of the pancakes there and share that, and it's enough food for both of us. So we typically do that when we go to Wildberry. And the other really kind of standout dinner we had was thanks to a member who invited us to join them at the Columbia Yacht Club. The Columbia Yacht Club is aboard a boat that is right there at DuSable Marina. You do have to be a member or have reciprocity, so either you're a member there or a member of another yacht club that has reciprocal privileges, and then you would be able to eat at the Columbia Yacht Club. And it was just a special night because we were able to sit on the bow of the boat there at the Columbia Yacht Club and dine there with that stunning view of the city. The weather was perfect. It was just a really enjoyable evening. Moving on to a few of the other things you can see and do if you are at a different marina, because DuSable can be a little bit hard to get reservations at. Burnham is probably the next closest to where all of the action is, so a lot of loopers do stay at Burnham Harbor. If you are coming into town and want to catch a Bears football game, Soldier Field is very near Burnham Harbor. And so is the museum campus, with most of the Chicago museums except the Art Institute. So the aquarium, the planetarium, the Fields Museum of History are all near Burnham. There's also one other highlight restaurant that when we were in that area of town we dined at, and that is called Ming Hin Cuisine. Some of the best Chinese food I have ever had. So highly recommend it if you are in that part of town. That is a brief look at Chicago. There is no way in the 4 or 5 days we were there we could see and do everything we wanted to see and do. It's a great place to have family visit, which we did, because it's easy to get in and out of Chicago, and if you're staying for an extended period of time, it gives them, you know, a little bit of flexibility in their travel plans. This just scratches the surface. There's so much to see and do here. So definitely do some research before you hit Chicago as part of your great loop. Thanks for watching. We will be back soon as we begin the inland rivers, and our next leg will take us from Chicago to Joliet, and that will be for us via the CalSag, which gives us a little bit more overhead clearance, which we need for the Perch to get through. Thanks for watching.